Take a little trip with me, I'm gonna take you home.
Take a little history down this lane of memories.
Down this lane.
So let's raise another glass for the glorious past and the friends we have become. Yeah, 'cause little did we know the good times come and go, but the best is yet to come.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. The recent Supreme Court judgment on women in the army has created a deep and sharp division between those who welcome the judgment and those who think it's a terrible mistake. With me to share his opinion on the subject is the former Deputy Chief of the Army, Lieutenant General Raj Kadyan. General Kadyan, before I come to the Supreme Court judgment and its implications, I want to ask you two specific questions. The percentage of officers in the army who are women is just 3.89. The corresponding figure for the Navy is 6.74. For the Air Force, it's 13.28. Clearly, the Army is the laggard service. Does this need to be rectified, or in your eyes, is it okay as it is?
Hello Karan, nice being with you. Before I answer, allow me to make one or two general points which are relevant. I hope I am not preempting your subsequent questions. Number one, I have never doubted the women being as brave, as courageous and as gallant as the men, or as being intellectually equal. My respect for the women, having worked with the women in the army, I am a father of a daughter, I am the brother of a sister, I have full respect for the girls. Maybe that's the reason I am showing reluctance. There is also a dichotomy in the system that in society, when we are enforcing this equality, actually the society, though it is changing, is not actually matching up. So when you say about the Army, Navy, Air Force, there is a difference. The difference is not in the bravery. Air Force, the fulcrum of the functioning is the aircraft. In the Navy, it is the ship. In the Army, it is the human being. That is where the difference lies, that the treatment of men and women have to be different.
So you're suggesting to me that the fact that the percentage of women officers in the Army is half that of the Navy and about a third or a quarter that of the Air Force is understandable?
Absolutely, very understandable and very realistic.
Let me then put a second specific question to you. As far back as 2010, the Delhi High Court ruled that women officers had a right to permanent commissions in the streams and units to which they were at that time admitted. That judgment was never stayed by the Supreme Court, but it was never implemented either. Can you accept it was a mistake not to implement it?
Technically, yes, it was a mistake. You can say Army can be faulted legally. The decision should have been either challenged or implemented. But we also need to look at why a disciplined force like the Army even incurred the possibility of being held in contempt. There must be reasons for it. Those needs to be examined. Why was the Army reluctant? There are some very practical problems.
So you're saying before you criticize the Army for not implementing the 2010 Delhi High Court order, look at the reasons why the Army didn't.
Absolutely.
Let's then at that point come to those reasons, and I'll come to them in the context of the recent Supreme Court judgment. Now, the Supreme Court judgment has two parts. I'll take you through both of them one by one. To begin with, the Supreme Court has said that women officers have a right to permanent commission, not just in the streams that were covered in the limited Delhi High Court order of 2010, but now the Supreme Court says they have a right to permanent commission in all 10 non-combat units of the Army. And that includes units like the Corps of Engineers, the Corps of Signals, the Army Ordnance Corps. As a former Deputy Chief, how do you respond to this much more expanded ruling?
Two parts. One is, as far as the permanent commission is concerned, I fully support that. If you've kept the girls for 14 years, let them also earn their pension. At the moment, the rule is they must do minimum 20 to earn pension. Either you modify a rule for the girls, give them pension in 14 years. But
Can I stop you there? Are you worried that the Supreme Court has said they can have permanent commission in units like the Corps of Engineers, the Corps of Signals, or are you happy with that as well?
No, it has implications. It has implications. They will be commanding units. And the men who come from the strata of society, which is of course changing, where his mother and his wife are in parda in the villages, you expect that man to obey the orders of the commanding officer. There is a dichotomy.
We've now come to the second part of the Supreme Court ruling, which is that women have a right to aspire to command positions at par with men. And that means that one day, conceivably, a woman could be the commanding officer of the Corps of Signals, of the Corps of Engineers, of the Army Ordnance Corps. How do you view that possibility, that women will hold command positions all the way to being the head of the unit?
Yeah, not only command position. A signal officer can rise up to the rank of lieutenant general. She will be signal officer in chief. They will be engineer in chief. But look at the contradiction in the society. When she reaches that level, we will still give her a preferred seating in the metro trains. That is where I am saying that society must change first and then carry the army along. Don't implement the change from the army and then don't use the army as a workshop for social engineering.
You're making a very interesting and important point. You're saying there is a contradiction in society. On the one hand, you believe women have to have separate bogies, separate seats in metros. On the other hand, you're saying to the army, we won't accept your attitude, which is the traditional attitude that women shouldn't have commanding roles over men. We insist that in non-combat units, women should be promoted, if need be, on skill and talent all the way to the top. This is a contradiction.
There is a contradiction, Karan. I am not a sociologist, but even in the rural society from which bulk of the soldiery comes and the urban society, there is a dichotomy. In the rural society, the role separation is very clear. Farming is a man's profession. You don't hear of a woman farmer committing suicide. Thousands of men have done it. In the urban society, while we profess to be equal, but that is only peripheral. I mean, girls may dress as the same man, they may the pants keep short hair. But in actual fact, you are still treating them special and not equal. Take the example of metro station. Delhi government recently extended a free ride in public transport only to women because that's the reality. We accept that women are special, they're not equal to men.
In other words, as long as society keeps believing women are special, not the equal of men, they need special considerations, special amenities which men don't have, why then not allow the army also to make the same distinction?
Absolutely. Army we will give an order, army perhaps will implement, but it is going to cost them in some terms which the opinion makers are not even aware of.
So you're saying that this attitude shown by the Supreme Court to the army is unfair to the army?
It would be. The results would be detrimental to the functioning of the army.
Explain how it would be detrimental to the functioning of the army.
Firstly, as I said, the man comes from a conservative society. His mother and his wife are still hidden behind curtains. They don't even expose. Here he'll be expected to obey the orders of the commanding officers who are women. Psychologically, there is going to be conflict. Secondly, the women, when they're exposed, if you command units, you will be exposed to units. God forbid if one of them gets captured in the war. Remember what happened when Kalia and his patrol body came back on 10th June 1999? The bodies were mutilated, even the genitals were gouged out. Are we as a society ready to accept that happening to one of our girls?
These were the arguments presented by the army in the Supreme Court, and Justice Chandrachud dismissed them as regressive. Are you saying that in fact greater attention should have paid, that to dismiss them in the way they were was wrong and unfair?
I respect the judgment, but I don't actually agree with it. With my experience of having been in uniform, having been born in a rural society, which is basically feeds the army by soldiering. People, opinion makers, I'm not singling out judges, but everybody who gives this opinion doesn't know what the army is.
So if I understand your position correctly, and I'm just summing it up so that there's clarity, you're willing to accept, in fact, you're happy with the fact that women have got permanent commissions. As you said, why deny them that if they can work up to 14 years, give them the permanent commission, so now at least they get pensions as well. But you are very unhappy, it seems, with the second part of the Supreme Court order, which says that women can now aspire to command positions on par with men. It's the second part that has upset you and you feel will disrupt the army.
Yes. For a Jawan, an officer is an officer, whether she is permanent or temporary, of academic interest. But the commanding officer being a woman is of relevance in this context. That's where there will be problems.
And you're saying Jawans, given their rural conservative background, are simply not willing to accept women as commanding officers?
Yeah. You see, in the rural society, that two are different. If your boy runs away with somebody's girl, it's a normal errant behavior. If your girl does it, then it's a stigma and there may be honor killing. That's a difference in rural society. Urban society doesn't have a community living like the rural society has. Here we don't even know our
And
neighboring
because our
community.
soldiers come from rural conservative backgrounds, you have to respect and understand the thinking of that background.
Absolutely.
Do not try and change it in this drastic overnight way, because it will create problems.
Absolutely. Understand his feelings and respect them. Don't force it down on his throat.
Now, as things stand, women have been given, and it is now the law of the land, the right to aspire to command positions on par with men. Does it then follow that they need to be the equal of men, both in terms of fitness and in terms of training?
I said in the beginning that there is the qualities of courage, boldness are the same in men and women. We have had Jhansi Ki Rani and others who are as bold and as brave. But physically you can't compare the two. I mean, biology has made us different. The shell of a Bofors gun is 46.2 kg. I don't know how many girls actually can offload it from the vehicle or load it in the vehicle. So physically you cannot compare the two.
You're saying there is no way a woman can be the equal of a man in terms of fitness.
Yes, she cannot be, not equal.
And you also, as an example, said, whereas a male soldier, could pick up the shell of a Bofors gun which weighs 46 kilos, you seriously doubt that a woman can do it.
Yeah, I'm giving one small example. There are many like this, where you require a more physical strength than a girl would normally be expected to possess.
If women are to aspire on par with men for command posts, they also need to be not just the equal of men in terms of fitness, they need to be the equal of men in terms of training. Does that mean that hereafter women officers have to go through the NDA and the IMA, that they cannot qualify as officers on the basis of a different course which is of possibly shorter duration?
Yes, Karan. As of now, it is not women in the army, but women as officers in the army. Only graduate girls have been joining from 92 onwards. So it is confined to the girls who are graduates, who are only less than 4% of the total women's population. If you are giving permanent commission, then why through the easier route of OTA only? Let them also get it like the men do. NDA, IMA, let them have 4 years of grilling, and if all those who survive, I'm using the word survive because even males, not everybody survives. If they survive that kind of training, then it is not only the physical part. Let me also, maybe slight diversion. I was reading in the paper today that in Surat, some 10 women municipal employees who were being made from temporary to permanent were examined collectively. They were asked to undress in front of the lady doctor. And there is a complaint, there is a hoo-ha, it will blow up. When I joined NDA, the second day of our joining, we were told that today there will be medical examination. So there were 17 of us in our shorts lined up in a hall. The doctor came and he said, okay, gentlemen, down your shorts. Some of us who went from rural backgrounds naturally showed hesitation, so he gave us a big shout. So we obeyed the order. He looked around for a minute, he said, okay, turn around and bend. Now, I don't know if NDA has changed. If this is the kind of, because that is how we were made from civil boys to men of the uniform. The girls should know what they can look forward to when they go through NDA and IMA.
You're saying a very important thing. If women want to be the equal of men in training, then they cannot expect short duration special courses to become officers. They have to go through what you called the grill of NDA and IMA. And you gave an example through this personal story that in fact NDA and IMA can be pretty tough for people who aren't used to that sort of treatment, both in terms of attitude and in terms of physical training.
If you want to be equal, then you have to go through the equal grind. Here we had some years back, a girl who appeared in SSB Allahabad refused to be examined by a male gynecologist. In the army, there is no distinction. Even at my service, my wife, she goes to hospital, she doesn't have a choice to examine her.
So women who want to have permanent commissions can't go through the OTA route to become officers. They must go through NDA, IMA.
And they better be psychologically ready to go through that.
One other thing before I take a break. The Supreme Court has so far not permitted women to be admitted to combat units. That wasn't, in fact, even in front of the Supreme Court. But by giving women not just permanent commissions but also command positions in units like the Corps of Engineers and the Corps of Signals, haven't they through the back door given women combat roles? Because you know better than me that at war, the Corps of Signals and the Corps of Engineers often serves at the front or very close to the front. If women have command positions in these units, they will have commanding roles in war. Through the back door, they've got it.
On the combat role, Karan, let me explain my view. The fact that they will come into the combat role is part of this judgment itself. The Honorable Court has said that their judgment is based on the constitutional provision of non-discrimination. So the Constitution does not also say that don't get them combat rules. Because nobody had appealed, they didn't give an opinion on that. Tomorrow if somebody appeals that I also have a right to go to the combat arms, the logic will be the Constitution.
But in the meantime, through the back door, by giving them command positions in the Corps of Engineers and the Corps of Signals, they've ensured that women will be virtually at the front when these units are at the front.
They will be at the front. As I said, nobody is actually out of the combat, but they are not technically combat arms. Only infantry, which include mech infantry, and the armored corps are combat arms. Others are supporting arms or the services. There are three. What two you are naming are supporting arms, engineers and signals.
But frequently during wartime, they are at the front.
See what happens in wartime. Let's look at the practical angle. In the 71 war, I commanded a company. From night of 3rd, 4th December, we started moving from Agartala, reached Dhaka on the 16th, fighting and all. All of us carried one blanket in our backpack. Initially, of course, we were all in trenches all the time, but as the pressure on Pakistani built up and they started withdrawing and the danger reduced, we could get a few hours of sleep. One blanket was not enough in the December cold of even of Bangladesh. There was another officer with me, artillery officer, the forward observation officer. We paired up. So did the men. And we had then two blankets, the little warmth was there. If one of us two was an officer, which will happen if we have the girls in the combat role, I wonder what we would have done. Either we would be shivering separately or we will be scandalized.
And I'll come to the problems of admitting women into combat units after the break. But do you think the Supreme Court realizes that by giving them command positions in the signals and the engineers, through the back door they've ensured that women will have combat roles, because in wartime, the signals and the engineers are at the front. And if women have command positions in those units, they too will be at the front. So the Supreme Court may think it hasn't given permission for combat unit participation, but actually through the back door, it has.
Yes, it would be. Even the Supreme Court has commented that for combat roles, the government can have a separate policy. They haven't commented more than that. But the logic will be the same. If I quote the Constitution, then there is no discussion.
Let's then take a break at this point. When I come back, I want to directly confront that issue, which for many is the most contentious. Should women be admitted into the actual combat units of the army? Or would that, in your opinion, be a terrible mistake? But first, a message from our sponsor, Glenlivet, whilst I take a sip from this glass.
Take a little trip with me, I'm gonna take you home.
Take a little history
Take a little
down this lane of memories.
down this lane.
So let's raise another glass for the glorious past and the friends we have become. Yeah, yeah, 'cause little did we know the good times come and go, but the best is yet to come.
Welcome back to a special interview for The Wire. My guest is the former Deputy Chief of the Army, Lieutenant General Raj Kadyan. General Kadyan, let's now directly confront that issue which the Supreme Court did not have to confront because it wasn't part of the appeals, but it's a critical issue and for many it's the most contentious issue. Should women be admitted to the combat units of the Army? On that specific issue, what's your opinion?
The combat arms are only infantry and armored corps. Infantry include the mechanized infantry and the foot infantry. The Supreme Court is sensitive of the issue. That's why they have commented that for combat role, the government can form a separate policy. But the government cannot overrule the Constitution. If I tomorrow knock on the doors of the court and say, okay, look, the discrimination against me because I as a girl am not allowed in the combat role, the Supreme Court will allow it. But it has serious implications.
What are those? Spell them out.
One is the danger of being captured. Secondly, hand-to-hand combat. Pakistan is not going to send their girls to match our girls. Can our girl physically match a Pakistani man? My answer is no. Secondly, if we get captured, the culture of our neighboring country is not the same as ours, the respect for women. A society which still sings songs in favor of the Johar that we used to commit to protect our honor, if they do that to one of our girls, what they did to Captain Kalia and others, I think we as a society will boil up. Are we ready to accept it? My answer is no.
Tell me something else. You had an example about how when you went to Dhaka during the 71 war, you had to share a blanket. In wartime, male officers and Jawans frequently live together, experiencing the same difficult conditions together. They sleep together under tanks or armored personal carriers. They huddle up together in trenches. How much of a problem would it be for a Jawan if the officer was not a man but a woman?
It would be, because she comes from the same social background where this kind of free mixing is not permitted. We often compare it to foreign armies. I think you might ask me that question, I don't know. But the problem, I only quoted for example. We were raising the National Security Guard, I was the chief instructor. When the RNAW Joint Secretary came that 7 of our officers have to be trained. So I said, fine, we'll train. So he said, one of them is a girl, that he said toward then. I said, we are all in tents, please don't let her stay here. You keep her in Delhi and send her every day. He said, no, she wants to rough out. She was very good physically. She did every obstacle and all that, unarmed combat and all. But she had a problem with the male, which I will not narrate, but there was a simple problem. She did not know how to hang dry her undergarments. She won't give it to the dhawi, naturally our girls won't. She didn't even know where to dry, so we had to give her a special kanaat. Of course, there was a report of a man entering her room and all, but that's a separate issue. It will become a lengthy. So the differences are not only in war, every day it is happening. You know, we normally say police officers, I have taken part in debate, choose I control a riotous mob and all. Nobody disputes that quality of your controlling. But at the end of the duty, you come to the safety and the privacy of your home. The army girl will go to the bunker.
So you're saying that in fact it would create enormous problems from washing undergarments through to the physical fitness if women were given positions in combat units.
It would, Karan, it would. I heard on the TV the other day the girl has even gone to Siachen. But what it cost the army in real terms, nobody knows. I mean, sorry for being crude. I won't know, that's a high altitude refrigerator. How do they dispose of their sanitary waste? I don't know.
And you're also absolutely certain that if in war, as often happens with soldiers, both Jawans and officers, you have to indulge in hand-to-hand fighting, a woman would not be able to stand up to a Pakistani man.
No, he won't be able to. He won't. That's it's a fact. Everybody knows about it.
So you're saying women in combat units would actually weaken the Indian Army's capacity to defend the country?
Let the man focus on defending the country and not on protecting his own officers. Then you are diverting the attention. And that is not what the army is meant for. We don't protect individuals there, we protect the nation.
I've heard your points fully. I've given you a chance to answer them extensively. What about the fact that in the Air Force, women perform combat duties as fighter pilots? In the Navy, they fire torpedoes and missiles at enemy warships. If women in the Navy and Air Force can perform combat duties, why is it so difficult for them to perform combat duties in the Army?
But their living conditions are different. Air Force girls, even after the sortie, comes back to the privacy of her room. The naval girl goes to the privacy of her cabin. The army girl will go into the community living of bunkers. Common toilets, no place to bathe, no privacy, no place to even wash and hang dry her underclothing. The Navy and Air Force don't go through that.
So it's the living conditions
Yes.
of the Army which are so different to the Air Force and the Navy that make it impractical and difficult for women to be in combat units.
Absolutely, Karan. Our army is unique in the world that we have a 2.5 yearly rotation, field to peace. No other army in the world undergoes that. In my 40 years of service, I saw 26 stations with average 20 months. So that kind of disruption and lack of privacy, most of the living was primitive. I don't think the girls are ready for it.
So you have, and I'm just repeating it so there's clarity, two broad reasons why you think women should not be admitted to combat units. One, they are not physically as fit and they will not be able to defend against Chinese or Pakistani soldiers as effectively as a man can. And secondly, the living conditions, whether in war or whether in peace, make it very difficult for women to be part of a tightly run unit.
Absolutely, Karan. Absolutely. Socially, we haven't prepared them to sacrifice that privacy.
Now, if women in combat units is a frontier that you believe must not be crossed, what about women as Jawans in the army? How do you view that prospect?
Jawan, a woman is a woman, whether she is an officer or Jawan will have in fact greater problem of intermixing. Officers have some kind of a separate tent can be given, but Jawans have to live together in the barracks and in the bunkers. So the problem for girls may be even more as Jawans.
So, women as Jawans is an even bigger problem than women as officers.
Yes, would be. Numbers will be larger, and also the conditions under which they live will be worse for Jawan than for the officers.
But the army is about to introduce some 1,000 women as military police. If women can be military police, why not Jawans? What's the difference?
No, there's a difference. Military police, what is the role? Traffic control and control of prisoners during the war. When there is a prisoner of war camp, guarding it. They don't go to the front line. They don't suffer the lack of privacy that the girls in the front line will suffer. So that's a softer job, technically, privacy-wise. So let them come there. Good idea. That is a social, some kind of a message that the army is sending that we are not against women joining the army. It will also open out avenues to more girls.
But you're saying just because you're admitting women as military police, this shouldn't become a stepping stone to women as Jawans.
I'm still saying that is inbuilt in our constitution. If the court safeguard the constitution, the soldier protects it in the front. Soldier doesn't even read the constitution. So if you go by the constitution which talks of non-discrimination, then combat roles are included.
You're making a very interesting point. If you go by the constitution, combat roles are included, women can't be excluded. Presumably that means we will have women in combat roles not just as officers but as Jawans one day if the Supreme Court goes by the constitution. But if the Supreme Court appreciates the army's concerns, which you've explained in great detail, then the Supreme Court will be prepared to treat the army as an exception.
I hope they respect the army's concern. We keep quoting foreign armies. Let me give you a basic difference. US Army has enormous problems, sexual harassment in Afghanistan and Iraq. But the difference in their culture is that if a married woman officer has an affair with another male, her husband will still accept as a wife. I would ask Indian men to cross their heart and truthfully answer, will he accept a wife who has had an affair with somebody else?
So sexual problems in the Indian army as a result of the commingling of men and women would be much worse in terms of their social impact than such problems are for the Americans.
Absolutely, they would be.
But let me make you one more point about foreign armies. In Israel, women have been performing combat roles, both as officers and as soldiers, from 1995. In Germany from 2001, and in Australia from 2013. Now, if in these countries, their women can perform combat roles, both as officers and soldiers, why can't Indian women?
Okay, Karan, 2 points. Firstly, in those countries, there are no field stations. There are no primitive living. Everybody lives in a very civilized manner with required privacy. Second, to say that they don't have a problem, I am aware of a case where the women crew of an Australian ship complained. They said in the evening when we go for a drink to the bar, we cannot stand the foul language of the sailors. So I don't know whether our sailors have been taught to only talk about climate change in their bars or there will be some other restrictions. So the reality is different than what we understand. Our society, our culture, our upbringing is different from the foreign countries. So you can't compare the two.
In other words, just because certain things have happened in the West doesn't mean that India is ready for the same things. Our society and our culture must be borne in mind when you decide about the role and function of women in the army.
Society is changing gradually. Parda system is disappearing. Untouchability is gone. It will take many more decades before we come to that level. Till that time, army must reflect the social norms. It's part of society. But don't make it a workshop or a laboratory for social experimentation till that happens. Let it move in tandem with the rest of the society.
Don't make the army a laboratory for social experimentation.
Yeah.
And you think that the Supreme Court judgment is actually doing that?
Unfortunately, yes.
General Kadyan, a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you, Karan. Thank you.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.